under the circumstances. It's really nice to see all of you. A lot of you we've heard stories about, or we know you personally from when we were kids. So it's really nice to see all you guys. You guys know my father was the king of nicknames. And I'm sure many of you were given some version of a nickname, often unflattering. We have the face, we have butthead, puffy, pee-pee, no chance. I didn't think that gentleman maybe wasn't too great with the ladies. And Fat Howie, which was strange coming from him, considering the source, and so many more. But he always affectionately referred to me as the pocket man. You see, he would often take me on business trips when I was really young, go to the Bahamas, various places in the Caribbean. And I'd always hold on to his back pocket because I couldn't keep up with his brisk walk. And I watched him and I learned he was very direct with people. He knew what he wanted. He could hold his own when it came to bargaining out on the streets for watches and things like that. And those were very fond memories for me. And for much of my childhood, I wanted to be just like my dad. He taught me many, many things, like how to throw a proper jab and keep my chin down when boxing. He was tough. He was disciplined. He was a man of routine. For instance, for the past several decades, he was on a very strict diet. Never once wavered. The diet consisted of 3 very important and major food groups: wine, mayonnaise, and Nathan's hot dogs. Now you may think that over 1,000 grams of salt per serving is a bad thing, but I like to think of it as part of his internal mummification process, which kept him alive far longer than he otherwise would have been. My dad and I, as you can't tell, had an unusual relationship. I told him when he died I was going to call the local taxidermist to have him stuffed, only slightly moving a part of his body each day to give the impression he was still alive. Unfortunately, I was outvoted and he was cremated. But that was the type of humor we had, and that was our relationship. Sometimes it was a little bit more like friends and brothers than it was a father-son relationship. Not to say that he wasn't there for me when I needed him most, or when I needed to confide in him. He always made me feel strong by the end of our conversation, like I could take the situation head on. He could be a dad when he needed to be, and he did it very well. He was tough under pressure. He taught us a lot, some by example, some by us doing the opposite of what he did. But we were still learning. He was who he was, and he really didn't care if we didn't like it, and I respected that. Sometimes he was tough, and we had to find the silver lining in the situation. Often it was a stretch to find it, but with mistakes comes wisdom, and wisdom is our silver lining. Wisdom helps us not repeat the mistakes we've made, but rather grow stronger through them. How do we find it? Well, we come to the Lord and we ask Him for it. We set aside our excuses, our habits, and our justifications and whisper, "I need your perspective, God. I come before you and humbly admit my desperate dependence on you." Only then can we start to understand what James was talking about when he instructs us to consider it pure joy, my brothers and sisters, whenever you face trials of any kind. That comes from James chapter 1. In trials there were several instances in our life of having to find the silver lining when it came to my dad. I had the duty of taking care of him these past few years, and it wasn't always easy. My dad could be, difficult at times. Sometimes I'd come home from work and his apartment would be completely flooded with water because he knocked a pipe off the wall, probably cooking one of his hot dogs. Inches of water would be in his apartment. I would begin to squeegee it while he sat up on the bed watching sports. Sometimes I would have to bring all the towels over that my wife and I had just purchased to re-clean the floor and then rinse and repeat the following week. I would be frustrated, and my wife would center me and remind me that I'm doing God's will as a son. I would listen to her and relax. Sometimes I had to clean up copious amounts of blood, wine, and melted chocolate. It was an ant's version of heaven. They were well fed, some of the biggest ants this side of the Nile. My brothers and I would joke that they were the happiest ants in the world. Looking back, it was a privilege to be part of his final years. Growing up at times was tough, as it always seems like we were on a roller coaster, which coincided with the stock market. If the market was down, so too was the spirit in the house. But when it was up, nothing was better. His true character would shine, his strengths would surface. He would howl in excitement in his famous falsetto voice. When I think of my dad's attributes, the greatest one was his generosity. It didn't matter how he was sitting at the time financially, he was still the most generous person I've ever met. He loved paying for us to travel. I remember our trips to Pamplona, where I ran with the bulls, as he had done so many years before. Germany for the World Cup with my brothers, where we started in Switzerland, drove across the border onto the Autobahn. I think Evan probably almost gave him a heart attack, he was driving so fast. Or our multiple trips alone to Paris, just him and I, where we'd go to the Louvre and read all day, looking at some of the most beautiful paintings in the world. He would let me wander around for hours and just tell him when to meet him and where. And we'd also gone to Amsterdam a few times. Although due to the present audience of women and children, I'm going to go ahead and leave those out. I will tell you that Tubby ended up so naked so often and so much in Amsterdam that I thought about putting a red light over his door to make a little side money for those with the big and surly fetish. We could have started a little enterprise, set up shop. He loved watching us play soccer. We never missed a camp, and he never missed a game or a practice. I can attest to that. I promise you, he never missed anything. When college came around, he was prepared. He would do anything to ensure that we earned our degrees. He just loved to take care of us. He felt pride in that. It was very important to him. He was generous. I like to think he was generous to a fault sometimes. That's why he didn't save any money for our future children's college. Community college it is. You're going to TCC, Tallahassee Community College. But really, I know deep in my heart, he ended up dead broke because of two things. That's mayonnaise and women. Sometimes together. Speaking of women, I learned a lot from him in that area as well. One, never marry a woman who's stronger than you. Janet was very physically imposing. And here's a fun fact, Janet went on to have a very successful career for the Pittsburgh Steelers as a linebacker. Also, never choose a wife who spends more on a purse than on a car. That's why I'm proud to say that my wife is a petite 5'3" on a good day and is sporting one of Walmart's finest winter line purses. Looks great, baby. No one knows.
Now they do.
Back to the silver lining of it all, if I had to say, and the most important connection that I can make of his being chosen by God to be my father is the blessing that I was lucky enough to receive, those being my brothers. If I was given any other father, I wouldn't have those two. Our kids, our wives, none of it. We are close because of him, sometimes in spite of him. He was the patriarch that molded us, kept us together, and gave us strength. He's the one responsible for two of us becoming teachers and mentors, and the other one a protector. All mentally tough and able to handle whatever life throws at us confidently. In his final few years, he suffered from numerous health issues, which is very difficult to watch. Stroke, a heart attack, prostate and bone cancer. He was walking around on a broken back for a long time, which we didn't know. He had dementia, which was extremely hard to watch. And my favorite being coined morbidly obese. The doctor's words, not mine. When the doctor said that, I fell to the floor laughing. All my dad could do is look at me and start laughing himself. He had that kind of sense of humor. I got Dave on speakerphone immediately, and we had a good laugh out of it. But that's the way he was. He had an incredible sense of humor. He would dish it to us just as much as I'm giving it to him now. Funny story, at Aventura Hospital, I was meeting with hospice a little bit towards the end there, filling out the DNR, do not resuscitate, and going over his final wishes in case he was incapacitated. And I was in the middle of answering some really difficult questions about what to do in each scenario when I heard a voice from the background say, "I'm not dead yet, you idiot." And I'm like, holy crap, he's still alive. I thought you died a while ago, but no, he was still there. He was listening to everything, and he was funny all the way until the end. After that visit, I said goodbye to him every time I was able to see him. I never knew if it'd be the last, so I wanted to make sure I didn't leave anything on the table or left anything unsaid. It was hard watching him deteriorate, hard watching this bigger-than-life figure sort of wilt down before my eyes. But all these things were a godsend. It brought him closer to me, and through Pastor Kennedy over there, closer to God. He fought. He hung on as long as he could until his sons and family could fly in that very morning, which he passed later that night. Hold his hand and pray that God takes him through heaven's gates. We explained to God that he could entertain the folks up there because he was so funny, sharp, and witty. So please, Lord, take him. We know that's not our decision. Paul said, "For grace you have been saved through faith, and that not of yourselves, it is the gift of God, not of works, lest anyone should boast." That's from Ephesians chapter 2, verses 8 and 9. In other words, God does not accept or reject us based on level of goodness or religious performance, but through faith alone. Please bow your heads. Dear Lord, we are so grateful you've made us all in your own image, given us gifts and talents with which to serve you. Thank you for David, my father, and all the years we shared with him. I pray to you, God, that you accept this imperfect man, as we all are, into eternal bliss, so that he can see his mother Nina, father Slick, and friends who were taken too soon, so one day we could be reunited, and we will. I look forward to that day. I'll bring the hot dogs. Amen.
Amen.